After the events of 28 years later, the Bone Temple had quite a few things it had to promise. It had to move Spike's story forward, it had to explore more of Dr. Kelson, and discover who and what the Jimmies are. And it does all those things. Sort of. Let's talk about it. So as someone who quite enjoyed 28 Years Later, found it refreshing, it was great to have Danny Boyle back behind the camera and have really good cinematography. It was interesting in the way it approached things with a very clear and distinct three-act structure: the father, the mother, and then Dr. Kelson at the end. A cool story, but very much a part one, which is where the Bone Temple becomes the part two, meant to explore more of everything that was set up in 28 Years Later. At the very start of 28 Years Later, we had the introduction of Jimmy, his father being the vicar within the church. He ends up hiding, survives, then we get reintroduced again at the end of 28 Years Later, and he's got his own little group of the Jimmies, a sick, twisted little group of upstarts in the apocalypse. And so the movie has to go ahead and explore them, get a better understanding of who and what he represents. It needs to explore more of what Dr. Kelson's doing, and it needs to keep taking Spike stories for it. After all, Spike is effectively our through line through what seems to be a new trilogy of movies, and it's very clear to me that this is definitely a part two after having watched it. And I think therein lies the problem. Now, this movie is good. It's got great cinematography, it's well directed by Nia DaCosta, it's got great performances, it has a really good score, picking up notes from the earlier movies, but also building and adding some new things here and there to give it its own distinct flavor. And oddly enough, it's actually got a really good soundtrack with, turns out Dr. Kelson's got quite a good record collection. However, this movie very clearly feels like a middle chapter. It slows things down. The whole movie's a bit more methodical. It's more explorative. It's definitely more character driven. And we've got to... Your enjoyment of this film is going to come from how much you buy into what it is offering. What you get from these characters. If you like the characters and how it's exploring them, you're probably going to get a bit more from this movie than maybe I did. I enjoyed where they were going, but it kind of feels like they've lost a little bit of what made 28 Days Later, and maybe even a little bit of 28 Weeks Later distinct and original. The movie at once feels more grand in that it's taking things to a completely different level. These are people who are on the edge of insanity. They're weirder, they're zanier, they're crazier, they're doing wilder things, so it feels very cartoonish in that sense, but then it also sort of pulls away from the grounded, gritty aspects of those earlier movies within this franchise, which is crazy to think that as of last year, there were only 2, and now we've got 4 within a matter of less than a year. I think that's where it somewhat loses me. For example, the Jimmies are an interesting group of people. They're definitely the violence within this movie, exploring how they're meant to sort of be like the devil on Earth. It's a weird little group. There's lots of religious stuff going on in there. It's cool, but it just felt out of place the entire time. And then given that this movie somewhat wraps up that entire arc for them, it makes you wonder why it was introduced so early in 28 Years Later, forgotten, brought back at the end of that movie, explored all throughout this movie just for it to abruptly end. And then Dr. Kelson literally spends the entire movie trying to cure Samson, our alpha, building a friendship with him. And they do some cool stuff with that. It's an interesting thing, but it feels like an episode of like The Walking Dead. Something you'd explore for 45 odd minutes and then just move on from. Given he's in the movie for about that much time in general, that's pretty much what it was. This movie, once again, feels really episodic. And once again, that makes it feel somewhat disjointed. We're getting lots of different perspectives. They only briefly touch, and they don't touch with any real meaning. And then everything just wraps up and finishes in the last, say, 10 minutes. Which, the last 10 to 15 minutes of the movie are very, very cool for multiple reasons. We have a really cool hellish sequence towards the end, and then we get some cool nods and nods towards earlier films, which I appreciated. which once again leads to the idea that this feels like a second act to a three-part structure, and from what I understand, they are trying to make this a trilogy, but each piece of that puzzle needs to be able to stand alone, and I think the biggest flaw amongst all of that is Spike. He went through a lot of growth for that first movie. Timid kid, learns how to handle himself, comes to grieve his mom, and then decides to go off on his own and then joins the Jimmies. Now once he's in the Jimmies, he's basically a kid completely out of his depth, and across the entirety of this movie, as far as I could see, he didn't really grow. He doesn't move forward, he doesn't progress, he's not challenged in any different ways that he doesn't end up with an easy resolution to, which was unfortunate. And so on a whole, this movie just feels like a whole lot of really shiny, pretty, gory nothing. Like, nothing got accomplished with this movie. All the characters we got introduced to in the previous film, in this one, and then gone. It left me feeling somewhat hollow at the end of the film. I watched a film that's very good quality, but I didn't watch a film that, for me, had an awful lot of substance. With that in mind, I'm going to give 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, a silver take. And really, it only just scrapes in there based on the fact I think it is a movie that has been made really well, but I didn't find it overly substantial. It didn't bring a whole lot to the table for me. I felt empty and hollow at the end of it, like I just watched 2 hours of something, but I can't quite put my finger on what it was meant to take away from it, as everything I invested in previously is now gone. So if you enjoyed what was there previous, you might find some enjoyment in this one. It's definitely violent, it's definitely visceral, it definitely feels like the 28 Days Later universe, but it also feels like everything that was set up goes absolutely nowhere. Everything you were invested in doesn't exist any further, so it makes you wonder why this chapter is here, and it also makes you wonder why they set up so much stuff in 28 Years Later for it to have such a middling, lackluster resolution.